I'm often asked why I would devote more than 5 decades and tens of millions of dollars, and I won't put an upper number on that because it could be embarrassing, but it's a very large number, to develop a flying car, or I would like to call it an aircraft that drives, or you might say more precisely a car that hovers, because it's really not a very good flying car I'm showing up here, but it's a car that drives very well, but doesn't fly very well. And then we have the Skycar, which flies very well but doesn't drive very well. You really can't get everything into one vehicle, so your preferences will be determined by how much you're willing to use fuel to fly. To answer that question as to why I would get into something that's taken many decades and that kind of money, I really have to go back to my childhood when I was a young child living on the side of a mountain in Canada. 5 years old, you know, Canada's not noticed for its great weather, particularly in the winter. And so getting to school was for a short person, was a very significant chore. I went through snowdrifts sometimes, I think, that were certainly close to my own height. So after the first year of school, I was on my father's farm. I discovered a hummingbird that had been trapped in one of the sheds on the ranch, and I took it out caught it because it had been beating itself against the window, so I was tired enough that I could pick it up. Took it outside, and as I held it in my hand and let it go, it hovered for a period of time and then simply vanished. I mean, to me it seemed like it vanished. Clearly took off at a very high speed. I really considered that a magic moment in my life, and it's been with me for a long time. That mobility, and I thought to myself, boy, what a great way to get to school. So I got hooked with that, and living on a farm, we had a lot of things to work with, a lot of tools, a lot of materials, and so I decided that I was going to build myself a helicopter. Fortunately, we get in a lot of things in life we don't really understand the complexities of. A helicopter is, as I learned very quickly in the process, a very complicated machine. It's a very difficult machine to fly, and if you put complicated together with difficult to fly, you get dangerous. And it's a very dangerous machine. But I proceeded as best I could with the tools I had available. A helicopter, I love the one comment about what a helicopter is best described as, and it's been described as assembly of 40,000 parts flying more or less in formation. It really characterizes it, and I really discovered that there's an element to that of truth, and I never finished the helicopter, needless to say. However, it didn't go without some use. My father had a hatchery, and when the power turns off in the hatchery, the heat tends to rise, and this cooks the eggs. And so my father took what I had built and used it to cool his incubators when the power went off. The issues of mobility that I face as a young person are upon us today in the form of transportation as we see it. The highway system is becoming essentially saturated. The future doesn't look bright, and there's some very complex elements associated with that. Ability to get produce to the market, which can become a problem. There's many other elements that we have to worry about, and I've put those together in a picture or a summary here, troubling travel statistics. You know what I'm doing at this stage of my life? I'm trying to rationalize these last 50 years I spent all that money. So I'm giving you all the reasons I should have doing what I'm doing. But certainly it's a scary thought that 91% of us get to work by road, and that these other numbers that I show you in front of you, but one of the most significant ones are the rate at which the truck traffic is growing. And where you might be able to stay home and telecommunicate, or you might be able to work at home in other ways, those trucks are still going to be on the highway, and they have to be on the highway to get your products to market. Trains are too slow, airplanes are too expensive, trucks are here to stay, and they're going to continue to grow at a rapid rate. If you go to, I was recently in China, and you go to a place like China, and you don't see any cars on the road, you see trucks, one behind each other like a train as far as you can see, going 20 miles an hour. It's an amazing how important the truck is to the freight industry. The sad statistic, and it's a very definite fact, that the infrastructure itself is growing at less than 1% per year. So when you've got this tremendous growth, roughly 30% more miles traveled by cars every 10 years, and you've got the infrastructure, the thing that gets you around, only growing less than 1%. It's not difficult to see the consequences in the near future. I like this particular layout here because it really shows sort of the history of infrastructure, and what it does is it tells you maybe a little bit about what we might expect in the future. You can see we originally, back in the 1800s, got around canals. I'm sure a lot of you know this, but it was true in Europe as well. It was true in much of Europe, it was true in the United States. We had canals all over the United States, especially in the East Coast, because there really wasn't a West Coast at that point. And then as that infrastructure came to a stop here, we had railways starting, and that terminated. In fact, today, the miles of track are decreasing every year in the United States. So that gets replaced to some extent by the automotive industry, and we can see this growth. And these are, while these are smooth lines, I can assure you the data behind it is very close to this. This is statistically a fact that we see the highway system growing, and you can see where it's going right now. It's stopping. So what happens? Traffic is stopping, trucks need to move, and we have a situation where the highway system is not going to do you much good. And I don't need to tell you that. Many of you who travel know how bad it's gotten even the last 5 years outside Davis, especially on a Friday night. But this is the next phase. Of course, this is a projection, but if it in fact follows, as one would assume it is going to, then that is a path we could take if we have a vehicle for us to follow on. And that's where I came into this, trying to create, as other people will with time, a way of creating a vehicle that will allow us to use an infrastructure in the future. One of the things that that vehicle needs to have is it has to have vertical takeoff capability. It has to be able to hover. If you have to have an airport, you really don't have something everybody can use. It has to be relatively low cost within a reasonable length of time. There's no reason for it not to be fast, because we're going to be in a world that's highly computerized. You're not going to be flying, you're going to be a passenger. You're going to be delivered from point A to point B. You're going to play computer games or read or sleep or do whatever. It's not something where you're going to be controlling it, so skill's not involved. If the system can handle the vehicle and handle other vehicles, there's no limit on speed other than the economy of speed. And so 300 miles an hour gets you about 25 miles a gallon at 25,000 feet. It's a number that's real and practical. It's about 200 miles an hour at sea level, because we can't fly as fast as sea level and get the same economy. Certainly in today's world, no emissions and fuel consumption are important. It needs to be quiet if you're going to use vertiports, and that's, I think, where we're going to start. And it needs to be streetable to some degree, in the sense that it would be nice to be able to get from your home to a vertiport a few walks or a few miles away. And of course, most important of all, it needs to be safe. So what do you do to make it safe? Well, we have redundant stability system in our vehicles, all fly-by-wire, which reduces the mechanics and reduces the cost of the vehicle. We use multiple engines. We use a special engine that we developed, and we spent the last 35 years developing. We have enclosed fans to reduce the risk, not only to you as a flyer, but also anybody who's on the ground working with you. We have redundant fuel tanks, racing bladder type fuel tanks, so that if you crash, God willing, at least at low altitude, you're flying the Jetsons 10 feet off the ground, you're possibly going to survive. And it's aerodynamically stable, which is obviously important if you look forward to surviving.